Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
Naturally, Roxanne noticed the sudden change in his attitude and knew the reason behind it. I'm glad to hear that, she replied coldly. Jeffrey's eyelids twitched slightly when he heard her cold response, but he forced himself to maintain a smile on his face. The kids miss Essie a lot, so no one is going to bully her. Pippa quickly stepped in to defuse the tension. Roxanne flashed her a polite smile in response. "I'll be placing Essie in your care, Ms. Ward." Since it was time for class to start, Pippa got ready to bring the kids inside. Right then, Lucian recalled something and called out to her, by the way, do not let Aubrey pick Essie up from school if she shows up. In the event that I am unable to pick Essie up myself, Ms. Jarvis here will do it for me." He then shot Roxanne a meaningful look after saying that. Of course, Pippa understood what he was implying. She glanced at Roxanne in surprise. "I knew there was something off about the relationship between them, but I didn't think Ms. Jarvis would take Miss Pearson's place in Mr. Farwell's heart." Having come to a sudden realization, Pippa began to view Roxanne in a different light. Roxanne did not expect Lucian to say something like that out of the blue, so she didn't know how to respond at all. She was still trying to find the words when Estella tugged at the hem of her shirt and asked excitedly, "Is that true, Aunt Roxanne? Will you come to pick me up from now on?" Everyone shifted their gaze to Roxanne upon hearing that. Roxanne simply couldn't bring herself to say no when she saw the expectant look in Estella's eyes. Yeah, that's right. If your daddy can't come to pick you up, then you can play with Archie and Benny instead," she said with a nod. All three of the kids cheered happily when they heard that. Similarly, if Miss Jarvis can't make it, I will pick them up for her, Lucian chimed in. The kids cheered even louder in response. Unable to turn his offer down, Roxanne could only nod in silence. Pippa looked at Lucian, then at Roxanne before nodding in acknowledgement. Understood. I will be sure to keep that in mind." Suddenly, Jeffrey thought of something and asked cautiously, what if someone from your family comes over instead? Mrs. Farwell or Mr. Elias, for example." Roxanne couldn't help but recall the argument between them the other day. Although she had stood firm in her stance, that encounter still affected her somewhat. Since Jeffrey had asked Lucian about Sonia, Roxanne got curious as to what Lucian's answer would be. Give me a call if they come to pick her up. Do not let Essie go with them without my permission," Lucian replied with a frown. Jeffrey nodded profusely. "You understood, Mr. Farwell." For some inexplicable reason, Roxanne breathed a sigh of relief after hearing his answer. "While I am glad to hear that Lucian is opposing his mother because she dislikes me, I can't help but feel that I'm being a little selfish here. Class is starting. I'll be bringing the kids into the classroom now." Pippa waved goodbye to them and brought the three kids into the classroom. Jeffrey, too, excused himself and returned to his office. By the time Roxanne came back to her senses, Lucian was the only one standing next to her at the kindergarten front gate. "Why did you tell Ms. Ward and Mr. Bauer that just now?" she asked helplessly while trying her best to remain calm. "If Ms. Ward and Mr. Bauer know about us, then practically everyone in the kindergarten will. We aren't exactly a couple yet, so I don't want to attract too much attention." Did I say anything wrong? "I'm more than happy to help pick Archie and Benny up and look after them if you can't make it. Do you not want my help?" Lucian replied in the most matter-of-fact tone possible. He then eyed Roxanne from head to toe as he continued, "If you don't want me to do that, I can have Caden." Roxanne knew just how persistent he could get, so she quickly cut him off. All right, I'll pick Essie up if you're too busy." Satisfied with her answer, Lucian nodded slowly in response. Looking at the time on her watch, Roxanne said, Anyway, I need to get to work now. See you later in the evening." She was worried about the research institute, as it had been without a leader for 2 days straight. Roxanne was about to leave when Lucian called out to her with a displeased frown, That's it? Are you just going to leave like that?" She paused in her tracks and let out a helpless sigh in response. Lucian seemed to have changed completely ever since I agreed to let him court me. For some reason, I just can't bring myself to say no to him. Roxanne turned around and asked, "What else do you want me to do?" Before she even realized what was going on, Lucian had walked up to her and given her a quick peck on the lips. That's more like it." Lucian gently rubbed her lips as he continued with a mysterious look in his eyes. Go on then." It took Roxanne a good few seconds to come back to her senses. Her face burned bright red when she realized he had kissed her in front of a kindergarten. "You..." She was about to warn him not to kiss her in public again, but she held her tongue as she didn't want him to think there would be a next time. "What is it?" Lucian asked in confusion. Please mind your behavior." Roxanne snapped at him and stormed off. Although there weren't a lot of people around when Lucian kissed her, Roxanne refused to stick around in case someone had seen it. Lucian followed behind her as the two made their way toward their respective cars. Roxanne started her car and was about to drive to the research institute, but the engine failed a few seconds after she started it up. With a frown on her face, she tried starting it a few more times, but to no avail. She gave up on driving and decided to hail a cab instead. As Lucian had yet to leave, he saw her get out of the car and quickly followed suit. What's wrong? I thought you were going to the research institute." My car broke down. It has been breaking down often ever since it crashed into a tree the other day. I'll take a cab there. You can head on over to your office," Roxanne replied in frustration. She was about to walk past Lucian and hail a passing cab from the street when Lucian said, "Let me take a look at your car. It might be something that I can easily fix." Feeling a little relieved, Roxanne turned around and walked back to her car with Lucian. Unfortunately, Lucian could not find anything wrong with her car even after inspecting it thoroughly. I think you need to have a mechanic repair it for you." All right. I'll take a cab there myself. Thanks for trying to help." Why would you choose a difficult option when a much easier one is right in front of you?" Lucian asked. Roxanne paused in her tracks and stared at him in confusion. I'm in no rush. How about I give you a ride instead?" Lucian continued with an eyebrow arched while getting out of her car. Roxanne was a little hesitant when she heard that. It would be difficult to get a cab at this hour, so Lucian sending me to work would make things a lot easier. But I'm not used to being so close to him just yet, nor am I able to shamelessly accept his help. As though he had read her mind, Lucian added, I don't mind charging you a fare if you're that particular about troubling me." Roxanne tensed up, as she knew Lucian meant something else when he said that. Sure enough, Lucian continued by saying, "I just need you to go somewhere with me." "Where to?" Roxanne asked instinctively. Instead of answering her question, Lucian simply opened the door to the passenger seat and motioned for her to get in. As the two of them had been standing around for quite some time, they were starting to attract the attention of the people nearby. Since it was getting late, Roxanne got into the car after a brief moment of hesitation. Lucian then made his way to the driver's seat and slowly drove out of there. Caden let out a huge sigh as he watched Lucian's car disappear into the distance. Ugh, it sure isn't easy being Mr. Farwell's assistant. Not only did I have to suppress my guilt and sabotage Ms. Jarvis' car in public, but now, I also have to clean up the mess myself and get her car towed to a repair shop. After making a phone call, Caden pressed his palms together and prayed that Roxanne wouldn't hold him accountable if she found out about it in the future. I'm just carrying out the orders given by Mr. Farwell, so she should go after him instead. Meanwhile, a huge commotion broke out in the classroom when Pippa brought the three kids inside. Essie. It really is her. All the other kids squealed in excitement as they rushed forward and surrounded the three. One of them had mentioned earlier that he had seen Estella at the front gate, but they didn't believe him at the time. It wasn't until they saw Estella enter the classroom that they finally believed it. They didn't really like Estella before, as she refused to speak to them, which led them to believe she didn't like them. As Estella gradually opened up with the help of Archie and Benny, however, the kids slowly warmed up to her. Eventually, they liked her so much that they actually missed her while she was gone. Having been treated coldly while attending classes at the other kindergarten, Estella wasn't used to receiving such a warm welcome all of a sudden. She decided to turn toward Archie and Benny for help, only to realize they had blended into the crowd. As the kids all took turns giving Estella hugs, one of the boys got so excited that he kissed her on the cheek. Archie and Benny leaped to their feet and yelled angrily, Hey! Boys aren't allowed to kiss her. Hugs only." Estella was still stunned by the sudden kiss, but she instinctively nodded when she heard them defending her. The boy then walked up to her and apologized. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to kiss you. I just..." After Estella snapped out of her dazed state, her lips curled into a smile when she saw the sincere looks on their faces. It's okay. I've missed you guys too." At that, the kids smothered her with hugs again. Pippa chuckled and shook her head when she saw how excited the kids were. They are rarely this happy, so why not let them have some fun? She flashed a smile and watched them from the side, lest they get into any accidents. Another teaching assistant from the same class approached her and whispered, Ms. Ward, how is Mr. Farwell related to Archie and Benny's mother?" Pippa froze in surprise. She recalled Lucian's words earlier and how Estella had addressed Roxanne this morning. It was evident that there was more to their relationship than either of them was letting on, although they had not been explicit about it. In the event that a member of the Farwell family wished to pick up Estella, Lucian would need to be notified by phone, whereas Roxanne could collect her without prior authorization. It could be said that Roxanne was much more important to Lucian than his family. However, she wasn't sure if they were ready to go public with their relationship. Pippa gave the teaching assistant a half-smile instead of answering her question. The teaching assistant continued, I saw Mr. Farwell and Miss Jarvis doing that through the window earlier." Pippa shot her a baffled look. The teaching assistant made a kissing gesture with her hands. Her gesture elicited a surprised look in Pippa's eyes. Pippa knew they were dating, but it was still shocking to learn that they had kissed at the kindergarten entrance. What about Mr. Farwell and Miss Pearson's engagement?" the teaching assistant asked curiously. Fearing that she might dwell on the matter, Pippa promptly clarified, I suppose they broke up. She wasn't sure about it, but Lucian had most probably broken up with Aubrey judging from how he treated her. I previously thought Mr. Farwell and Miss Pearson didn't seem like a real couple. Miss Pearson was so rude to us, remember? She doesn't deserve to be with Mr. Farwell." The teaching assistant was pretty upset with Aubrey. After learning that Lucian and Aubrey were no longer together, she promptly vented her frustrations. I don't think Essie likes Aubrey, too. Did she do something to Essie behind Mr. Farwell's back?" They both turned to look at Estella. A long while later, the teaching assistant piped up, Actually, Essie resembles Miss Jarvis, doesn't she? She adores Miss Jarvis. If I didn't know the truth, I'd have assumed she's Miss Jarvis' daughter." Pippa observed Estella for a while and nodded in agreement. However, Estella was Lucian's daughter, and Roxanne had her own children. Naturally, they weren't related to each other by blood. Pippa sighed softly. I wish that's true. That way, Essie wouldn't have refused to talk for years. When Estella started attending kindergarten, Pippa had concerns about her well-being. Fortunately, Roxanne appeared in the little girl's life. The teaching assistant agreed. Yes. Perhaps fate brought Miss Jarvis to Essie so she could be her savior. Look how happy Essie is now. Their hearts melted at the adorable sight of Estella playing with her friends. Meanwhile, in Lucian's car, Roxanne couldn't help but glance at him through the rearview mirror. 6 years ago, she wouldn't miss the chance to spend time with Lucian. She would always stare at his face intently, hoping he could spare a glance at her. Alas, it had never happened. Now, she finally got the chance to stare at him whenever she wanted. All the while, she had thought her feelings for Lucian had faded over time. Never in her wildest dreams did she expect to still be deeply and wildly in love with Lucian. How was it? Are you satisfied? Lucian suddenly turned to look at her. Roxanne stiffened and blurted out, not bad. Hearing that, Lucian chuckled in amusement. Roxanne belatedly regained her composure and realized what she had just said. Her cheeks flushed a crimson red immediately. Lucian wasn't about to push her too much. Sensing her anxiety, he changed the topic. Thanks to you and the boys, Essie is doing so much better now. Roxanne relaxed subconsciously when she heard Estella's name. Her eyes softened as she said, I didn't do anything. Essie is shy, so we should make an effort to befriend her. I should be grateful that she's willing to open her heart to me. There was nothing more moving than being trusted by a young girl. They chatted about Estella's change throughout the journey. Roxanne's gaze soon drifted to the scenery outside the car window. She was taken aback by the unfamiliarity of her surroundings. Glancing at her watch, she realized they should have arrived at the research institute from the kindergarten ages ago. Are you sure you're going the right way? She asked quickly, her voice full of concern. This isn't the route to the research institute. Lucian didn't make a U-turn. Instead, he asked calmly, didn't you agree to go someplace with me? Roxanne was reminded of the fair Lucian had mentioned earlier. Furrowing her brows, she protested. You didn't say that we're heading there now. I was planning on heading back to the research institute. Knowing what she was thinking, Lucian drawled, You haven't visited the research institute in a while, but it's still functioning efficiently, right? This shows that the institute can operate smoothly even when you're not present. You needn't feel obligated to return today. Roxanne could not refute his words. Indeed, the research institute had been doing well despite her and Colby's absence. After accepting a project, the researchers simply had to conduct their research as planned. In normal circumstances, nothing unexpected would occur. She sighed inwardly and caved in. Where are we going now? Since you returned to the country, you've been occupied with work and looking after Archie and Benny. You can't be stressed all the time. I'll take you to a place where you can unwind. Roxanne instinctively wanted to respond that she didn't feel stressed at all. However, it was as though Lucian had expected her response, as he added, I've been pretty busy with work at Farwell Group as well. I also had to investigate Colby's background. It's pretty exhausting, so I'd like to take a break. Roxanne swallowed the words on the tip of her tongue. If Lucian was merely concerned about her, she would think it was unnecessary to drive to someplace just to relax. However, Lucian had used himself as an excuse, hinting to Roxanne that he was too busy investigating something. This left Roxanne feeling guilty, and she felt that it was her responsibility to unwind with him. Not long after, the car rolled to a stop before a beach. Roxanne felt her heart relax at the sight of the vast ocean. It had been some time since she had last come to the beach. 6 years ago, before their separation, she would visit the beach alone to find solace whenever Lucian hurt her feelings. After giving birth to Archie and Benny, Roxanne would relax by spending time playing with them. Every time she spent time playing with the children, she would eventually feel rejuvenated. To her surprise, she felt the same way today at the sight of the endless sea before her. I recall you used to come to the beach frequently in the past. Lucian's voice echoed in her ear as he reminisced about old times. After you left, I'd also come to the beach whenever I felt tired. It was a great feeling. With that, he clasped her hand and led her to the beach. It was a weekday, so there was no one in sight. Roxanne hesitated briefly and allowed him to lead her to the beach. They strolled along the beach while chatting about the events that had occurred over the past 6 years. Roxanne shared the details of her life over the past 6 years with Lucian, excluding information about Archie and Benny. This was the first time she had spoken about it with such composure. Lucian listened to her story quietly as guilt and anguish flashed across his eyes. The more Roxanne talked, the more relaxed she felt. Eventually, She took off her shoes and strolled along the shoreline without them. Seeing that, Lucian couldn't help but recall how she had gotten hurt previously. It was dark that night. I didn't see clearly and got hurt. This time, I'll be careful, Roxanne said cheerfully. Right after she spoke, she spotted the sharp edge of a blue shell peeking out of the sand. Roxanne's face lit up with excitement as she exclaimed, "Oh, how wonderful! The ocean never ceases to amaze me with its surprises." She dug the shell out and showed it to Lucian. Lucian stared at her smile. "It's gorgeous." Roxanne was engrossed in admiring the shell and didn't notice his pointed look. She felt proud to hear him agree with her. Something occurred to Lucian right then, and he lowered his head to search the beach. Roxanne looked up to see him furrowing his brows as he searched for something, as though confronting a formidable enemy. Curiosity swelled within her. What are you looking for?" Lucian replied honestly, "Shells. You seem to adore them, so I was thinking of collecting a few shells to make a bracelet for you." Surprise flashed across Roxanne's eyes. They had known each other for some time, but it was the first time Lucian had offered to make something for her. He was a well-respected CEO, yet he thought of making a bracelet for her just like a high school student. Roxanne would be lying if she said she wasn't shocked to hear that. "Since you didn't appreciate the flowers I gave you before, I wonder if my handmade bracelet will be more to your liking," Lucian quipped. Roxanne was touched, but in the end, she merely smiled and said, "How childish of you." Lucian didn't feel guilty at all. He accepted her compliment and started searching for shells on the beach. Roxanne hesitated for a while before joining him in his search. As they combed the beach for shells, they playfully joked with each other like a pair of schoolchildren. At the sight of a lovely seashell in the distance, Roxanne immediately made her way toward it without any hesitation. As soon as she crouched down to pick up the shell, the waves suddenly became rough and rushed toward her. Getting soaked was not what Roxanne had anticipated, but even with her disheveled appearance and her hair hanging limply behind her ears, she still looked remarkably beautiful. Roxanne was caught off guard by the wave, and it took her a few seconds to regain her composure. By the time she did, the shells she had gathered in her palm had been swept away by the water. She couldn't even locate the shell she had originally spotted and wanted to pick up. She felt both amused and helpless. It had been a while since her last visit to the beach, yet she got soaked by the seawater, causing her to lose all the shells she had collected. Lucian heard Roxanne gasp and recognized that she was close to the sea. He stood up and walked over to her. "Are you okay?" Roxanne wiped the seawater from her face and shook her head, letting out a remorseful sigh. "I'm okay, but my shells have been washed away." Her clothes were drenched and stuck to her body. As she moved, he could see her seductive curves clearly. Lucian stared at her and felt a rush of blood in his nether regions, as he had been living a celibate lifestyle for 6 years. However, he was more worried about her. In a low voice, he said, "Let's go back. We can come another day." He was afraid she'd catch a cold if they continued to stay there. Roxanne knew why he was concerned. Despite feeling disappointed, she nodded and walked to the shore. Be careful." Lucian's brows furrowed as he hurried over to her in huge strides. Roxanne heard the waves crashing behind her, prompting her to quicken her pace. Unfortunately, her foot caught on a hidden rock, causing her to slip and fall backward. The wave rolled over and nearly swallowed Roxanne whole. Roxanne was taken by surprise when the waves crashed over her and threatened to engulf her. She desperately tried to stay afloat, flailing her arms and legs in a frantic attempt to regain her footing. When she was about to suffocate, a large pair of arms held her hand and pulled her up from the ocean. Roxanne spat out a mouthful of salty seawater and panted heavily. Lucian fixed his gaze intently on her, displaying a look of anxiety that she had never seen on him before. After the previous incident, he couldn't bear to see her in danger anymore. Roxanne finally regained her composure and felt remorseful for causing him to worry due to her negligence. "I'm sorry." Before she could finish, Her lips were sealed. Lucian's sudden kiss was so passionate. It was as if he wanted to devour her whole. He released his grip on her hand, then encircled her waist, drawing her closer. Roxanne was still in a state of shock. Her body was stiff and her eyes turned as wide as saucers. I might be wrong, but Lucian's hands seemed to be trembling. Sensing her distraction, Lucian frowned and forced her to open her mouth so he could deepen their kiss. Roxanne finally understood why he had initiated the kiss. Her eyelashes trembled as she closed her eyes and flung her arms around his neck. They stood among the crashing waves, lost in the passionate kiss, not caring whether someone else would show up suddenly to interrupt their intimate session. In the distance, a camera appeared briefly among the bushes, taking several snapshots of them before retreating back behind the foliage. Roxanne felt short of breath and pushed Lucian twice, signaling him to stop. Lucian reluctantly let go of her, his breath coming in heavy gasps. His eyes turned red as he struggled to keep his desire in check.
I'm sorry.
You must have been worried about me, Roxanne said softly as she avoided his intrusive gaze awkwardly. Lucian said nothing and merely stared at her darkly. Suddenly, he bent down and swooped her up. Shocked, Roxanne instinctively clung to his neck, afraid she would fall to the ground. Her actions happened to play in Lucian's favor. The violence in his gaze faded a little as he strode to the shore. Roxanne's cheeks were flushed as she said, "He put me down. I can walk by myself now." She knew she had scared him. He scooped her up in his arms because he was fearful that something similar would happen once more. Ignoring her protests, Lucian carried her to his car and helped her settle into the passenger seat. He retrieved his suit jacket from the back seat and draped it over her shoulders before taking his place behind the wheel. Noticing he was still mad at her, Roxanne felt utterly helpless. Didn't we come here to relax? That was just a tiny accident." Lucian's brows were still knitted together. Deep down, she let out a sigh and said coyly, "Have you promised to give me a handmade shell bracelet? Don't forget about it." Lucian turned over to look at her. "I won't go back on my word. I'll come back another day to find the shells. As for you..." He trailed off and gazed at her darkly for a few moments. Go back and get some rest. You don't want to catch a cold." Roxanne was relieved. She pursed her lips and gave him a smile. Lucian started the engine and drove away. At the same time, Corey emerged from the bushes and patted the leaves away from his body. He lowered his head to check the photos he had taken earlier. Corey was pleased to discover he was still a good photographer as the photos turned out nicely. He transferred the photos to his phone and picked a few to send to Aubrey. Aubrey had been in a daze these few days after getting rejected by Lucian. She didn't even step out of her bedroom. "Aubrey, come out and have something to eat. Perhaps there is still a chance to turn things around. Lucian won't be that cruel." Gina coaxed outside. She couldn't bear to see her daughter torturing herself. Aubrey ignored her outright. Upon discovering that Lucian intended to annul their engagement, Frida had vanished without a trace, and Aubrey had not heard from her since. Similarly, Corey had disappeared after Roxanne's hospital discharge, leaving Aubrey clueless as to his whereabouts. None of them are reliable. Aubrey was simmering in anger when her phone lit up. Furious, she grabbed her phone to see who it was. It was a text sent by an unknown number. She clicked into it and saw a few photos of Roxanne and Lucian together that were obviously taken without their knowledge. In the photos, Lucian and Roxanne were sharing a passionate kiss in the sea before Lucian swept her up in his arms and carried her away from the waves. Aubrey grew increasingly disgusted and nearly broke her phone screen with her forceful grip. Batch. You're nothing but a batch, Roxanne. The public has yet to be informed of the annulment of our engagement. How dare the batch do that in public? I can't let her get away with this." Gina heard the commotion outside and knocked on the door anxiously. "Aubrey, what happened? Open up." Aubrey did nothing to assure her mother and angrily typed a reply to the unknown number who sent her the photos. Are you Corey? She couldn't think of anyone else who could take photos of Lucian covertly and send them to her. She soon received a reply. It looks like you have been leading an uncomfortable life recently, Ms. Pearson. Aubrey gritted her teeth in fury. She quickly typed, "How dare you send these photos to me?" She had paid him handsomely, yet he had disappeared without a trace when she needed his help the most. Everything has been set in stone. I can't believe he's shameless enough to come to me now. Corey could imagine her clenching her jaw in fury, but he wasn't bothered at all. He sent her another text. Of course. Who else will pay me other than you? Back when Aubrey had asked him to help kill Roxanne, Corey knew that she was a mad woman. As soon as Roxanne was discharged from the hospital, Corey stopped contacting her and used the money she had given him to have fun in Marsingville. He had planned on earning more money there. Unfortunately, within a few days, his expectations were dashed, as he ended up losing all his money and accrued a hefty debt. Corey remembered Aubrey and decided to come back to scam more money from her. Corey, consider these photos my gift to you. Miss Pearson, if you wish, we can continue our collaboration. You know how capable I am, right? A crazed look took over Aubrey's expression. She replied, collaboration? Sure. You want money, right? I have yet to change my mind about killing Roxanne that batch. If you agree, I can pay you any amount you want. As she remained stubborn, Corey became impatient and sent her photos of her poisoning the kids previously. Aubrey blanched in shock at the sight of the photos. She replied hastily, "What are these? Didn't you delete them?" She had spent 10 million on these photos and watched Corey delete them in front of her eyes. Corey, delete? Why would I delete these valuable photos? Do you think 10 million can satisfy me? These photos are my cash cow. Aubrey trembled in rage and muttered, "A batch. Damn. Die, all of you." Corey sent another text. "I didn't want to burn my bridges, but since you're stubborn, don't blame me for doing this. I'll be honest with you. I owe a huge gambling debt. If you won't help me repay my debt, I guess I'll have to ask for Mr. or Mrs. Farwell's help." He was threatening Aubrey and also mocking her for losing her position as the future Mrs. Farwell. Aubrey promptly lost control after reading the text. She threw her phone away without a second thought. Her phone crashed into the door with a thud before falling onto the carpet on the ground. Outside, Gina summoned a servant hastily. "Go get the keys to unlock this door." Inside, the phone tumbled to the ground with the screen facing up. The screen was still lit as Corey's texts arrived continuously. Aubrey's chest heaved in anger. A while later, she picked up her phone and ignored the cracked screen to type a reply. "What do you want?" "Corey, I said, I want money. If you can offer me a satisfying reward, I can disappear. Otherwise." Aubrey gripped her phone with such force that she nearly cracked the screen. What a rough. Even if I pay him the money as requested, he will never delete those photos. He will keep these photos and ask me for more money when he is in need of money. Aubrey knew she would be inviting trouble if she were to pay him the money as requested. Having fallen for his trick previously, she refused to repeat her mistake for the second time. It's time to eliminate Corey. Corey had no idea what Aubrey was thinking about, for his mind was preoccupied with the thoughts of money. He continued sending her messages of threat. All of a sudden, Aubrey messaged, "Okay. How much do you want? I'll give you anything." Corey curled his lips in satisfaction and answered, "You should have said that earlier. We've been working for a while now. Why did we have to fight for such a long time?" Aubrey replied impatiently, "Cut the nonsense. How much do you want?" Corey mulled over it for a while before messaging, 50 million. "I'm sure this is an amount you can afford, Ms. Pearson." Corey's debt was worth 20 million. As for the remaining 30 million, he intended to use it for another gamble to see if he could rise from the ashes. If that failed, he could still use the photos to get more money from Aubrey. Corey felt that his plan was perfect. Meanwhile, Aubrey was enraged when she saw the number. 50 million? Why not just tell me that he wants the entire Pearson group instead? Does he really think I will be able to get 50 million with just a snap of my fingers? The amount Corey asked made Aubrey even more certain about killing him. She asked, "Where are you? I'm going to meet you in person for the exchange. This time, you have to delete the photos while I'm watching." Corey soon sent her an address and added, 11 in the morning tomorrow. I'll be waiting for you to come. Once he sent the message, he skillfully took out the SIM card from his phone and tossed it into the sea before walking away from the coast. Right then, Gina had finally gotten the keys and unlocked the door to Aubrey's room. As she rushed in, she asked, "Oh, what happened, Aubrey? What was that earlier?" Right as she said that, she noticed the phone with the shattered screen in Aubrey's hand. Anyone could figure out that Aubrey had thrown the phone. Did someone say something to you?" Gina asked with concern. Aubrey was livid, so she fumed at Gina as well. Nothing. I'm very mad right now, so stop talking to me." Gina was startled by her attitude, but at the end of the day, Aubrey was still her daughter. After a moment of recomposing herself, Gina continued to voice her concerns. Aubrey pushed her away and strode toward the door. "Since I'm meeting him tomorrow, I'll have to assign capable men on this so that Corey won't be able to escape." "Aubrey, where are you going?" Gina was worried when she realized Aubrey was leaving without having her meal. Aubrey continued her way out of the mansion without sparing her mother another glance. The next morning, Corey waited for Aubrey to come with the money at the abandoned factory they had previously met at. When it was 11, footsteps echoed in the factory. Hearing them, Corey stood up and peeked around the corner. Aubrey was standing at the entrance by herself with a bank card in her hand, looking around for him. Corey? Where are you? Come out here. I have to see you delete the photos with my own 2 eyes." Right as Corey was about to respond to her, he spotted half of someone's body at the back of a pillar behind Aubrey, and that person was even holding a gun. Once he spotted that person, he spotted the rest. There were over dozens of people, excluding him and Aubrey in the factory. As Aubrey walked further into the factory, the people slowly inched closer too. Corey sneered. "Miss Pearson, how dare you pull dirty tricks like these? Have you forgotten what I work as?" Right as he said that, he ran to the window on the 2nd floor and leaped out of it without hesitation. In the next moment, various voices reverberated in the factory. Over there. Get him." Corey started his car with steady hands and sped toward the path he had planned out. By the time Aubrey's men ran out of the factory and went back to start their cars, Corey was long gone.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.